This episode is sponsored by Linode. Do you need a Linux server for your latest creation? Then check them out. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit per second network connections, Intel E5 processors, and top-of-the-line hardware to run your servers on. It deploys Linux in seconds from a Linode cloud, and you can choose your Linux distribution and node location right from the manager. They have locations in Asia, North America, and Europe, and a sweet set of tools to make it easy to manage it. If the web interface isn't your thing, they also have an API and a command line. They also provide two-factor authentication, IPv6, DNS manager, plumbing, scaling, and everything else you would want. So get the most out of your Linux node by checking them out at linode.com or devchat.tv/linode. Hello and welcome to React Native Radio. Today we're live at Microsoft Connect in New York, and we're sitting down with a few people that work with Microsoft App Center, that was Microsoft Mobile Center. They kind of made a big announcement yesterday, and we're here to kind of talk about all of the things that we can do, not only with React Native, but just in the mobile ecosystem in general. So joining us today, we have Ryan Salva, Keith Ballinger, and we also have a new guest, Simina Pasat. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for coming and hanging out with us for a few minutes here. So there was a lot of announcements yesterday, but I kind of wanted to just start the show off by talking about like what you're all excited about and what React Native developers kind of would be interested in playing around with and using. I'm really a big proponent of code push. I'm in the middle of kind of writing a blog post right now about using push notifications with App Center. I've used analytics, all these things. But there's also a couple of new things that were kind of announced yesterday. So I guess, whoever wants to kind of pick this question up, talk about like what you're excited about, what big features and announcements kind of went on yesterday.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest announcement from my perspective is just that App Center is now a GA product. It's supported. You can, to the degree that we charge you for things, you can pay for it. All of those things. That said, most of it remains free for all but probably the biggest of development teams who have very sophisticated needs. From a React Native perspective, all of the things that a React Native developer would expect and to the degree they've used App Center would love are still there. You can do CI, you can do testing, you can distribute to people. Not only can you distribute to beta testers and to the App Store, but you can also distribute to your audience through code push. That's built in and integrated with App Center. Obviously, our analytics are in crash reporting. So that everything is there, and the big piece of it was the change in name. And just that, hey, this is now a GA product. It's no longer something that we call preview or alpha or beta or any of those things.
Awesome. So ready for prime time.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that at least I was really excited for us to be able to announce was the pricing. I mean, you already said it, but I know that I got a lot of angst from talking to developers like, oh my gosh, Code Push is going into Mobile Center, App Center. Is there going to be a price for this? And, this thing that I've come to depend upon for my React Native application, am I now going to have to start paying $100 a month, $1,000 a month because I've got a really giant code user base, right?
Right.
And that we're able to continue delivering to free to the vast majority of developers was, I think, a really, really big win for the community. I was always just really, it meant a lot to me that we have been able to deliver Code Push for free for the last 2 years, and being able to continue that even kind of as we've wrapped it into part of a larger, kind of not only just a larger work stream, but part of a larger piece of the business is critical.
Yeah, so, just to build on that, this is actually true for all of the features. Something like we don't charge you for beta distribution. It's the same price, which is just $0 that Code Push is. I think, there's two things that we charge you for right now. One is testing and one is build. And so Simina actually works on build. She can describe the philosophy there.
Yeah, the philosophy there is that you have some needs and in terms of build, and probably few hundred free minutes per month should be enough to at least get the value out of it and understand why do you want to use this service. And it's the same for test. But as your needs evolve and you want more and more developers are in the team and they're constantly pushing code and you want to always build and test this code, you'll have to start paying for concurrent builds. And in all honesty, it's not something cheap to operate. So yeah, it's kind of understandable that it provides a lot of value. So we also want to charge for it.
Yeah. I feel like we might have put the cart in front of the horse a little bit here. While I'm excited to talk about it for free, I realize maybe not everyone knows what Code Push or even App Center is in the context of this.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Should we rewind that clock a little bit?
Yeah, we can definitely do that because I do consulting and I've worked with at least a dozen clients, maybe dozens of clients this year, getting them up and running with React Native, and also maybe just going in and helping them integrate React Native with their existing, whatever they're working with. And at this point, 100% of the customers I work with are getting and using Code Push. Either they already have it, or I actually tell them, you have to have this. This is awesome.
It's part of the default toolchain,
and then
right?
once they see it, of course, they really like it. But let's talk about a couple of things. One, what Code Push is, and two, that you mentioned pricing. Is there a price to use Code Push, I guess?
Okay, sure. So we'll start with what is App Center and how does Code Push play into that, right? So App Center is essentially a collection of services that provide everything that a React Native developer, or for that matter, a Swift developer, a Java developer, would need in order to not just deliver their app, but more importantly, deliver it quickly and deliver it with confidence. So this is what often gets called, and I know this word means a lot of different things to different people, but your DevOps pipeline, right? So it could be things like build, we just talked about. So whenever you check in your code to GitHub or wherever it is, whatever Git repository it's going to be, having a build automatically kick off in the cloud that is going to run all of your unit tests, that on successful completion is going to pass off to a set of automated UI tests. Because let's be candid, a lot of us may have a few unit tests in place, but the coverage often isn't all that great, and unit tests only cover a portion of the functionality within your app. So it's really helpful and almost necessary to have a couple of quick sanity checks for mainline scenarios to perform automated UI tests on real devices, so that before you distribute out, whether it's distributing to beta testers or actually distributing out to the App Store, that those mainline scenarios are pretty well covered. I think one of the important things here is I said on real devices, but often that maybe that gets underplayed a little bit. So often these automated UI tests end up happening on virtual machines of some kind. In our case, that's actually not true. They genuinely are executed on real devices. And the facilities where these things happen are freaking crazy town. You go in and there's just hundreds and thousands of Android phones and Apple phones, right? iPhones just lining the walls, all plugged in via little USB cords, all with essentially what amounts to a piece of duct tape over the screen. Not just because the amount of light they emit is astounding, but because we want to keep your app concealed and private, right? Even from the network engineers there in the rooms. And so all these are executing your automated UI test right there, and then we kind of flow on to distribution services, and this is where Code Push really comes into play, but also gets married with another service that some of your listeners might have used before as well. Are you familiar with Hockey App?
I am. I've never actually used Hockey App.
Oh, that's all right.
We've used TestFlight quite a bit, but I know Hockey App is kind of in the same space,
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of similar category. Hockey App's been around for how many years now?
Actually, Hockey App's been around as long as TestFlight. They both were started right after Apple announced over-the-air support in 2011, maybe.
11, so 6 years. I was thinking about 6 years.
Quite a while ago.
Yeah, and Microsoft acquired it 3 years ago this month, I think.
3 years ago in December.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
3-year anniversary of Hockey App. Yeah.
All right.
So it does distribution like TestFlight, but it does more. Hockey App also does crash reporting and analytics. And what's interesting is I think most people like you know Hockey App from the distribution piece, from okay, I need to get this app to my beta testers. The crash reporting piece is actually incredibly accurate. And we've done a lot of work and investment. I mean, HockeyApp did a lot of work for us before Microsoft acquired it, and then afterwards. Where if you're writing an app, the level of precision in the crash report, meaning telling you the actual real line of code that's actually causing the problem and telling you why that occurred, is vastly superior to any other crash reporting service. It's because it's not easy. You get these stack frames from the device, you get the symbolic, the symbols, and you have to kind of figure out what happened and then report it back to the developer. And that's something that it's a kind of a hidden gem of HockeyApp that a lot of people didn't really know about.
Yeah, so how does that work with React Native, considering that the stack traces that we want are usually JavaScript stack traces?
That's a great question. That's a great question. This is actually one of the really nice things about being able to integrate a build service with a crash reporting service. Logically, many of us might kind of approach it thinking like these are completely different things, but especially in the case of something like React Native, they become very dependent upon each other because we can generate the source maps for the JavaScript error that out of the build, so that now not only are you going to get your native stack trace, right, for Android or for iOS as the case may be, but you'll also get your JavaScript stack trace if the error occurred in the JavaScript itself, right? Now, without source maps, you'd kind of
you get the funky JavaScript that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. The kind of semi-compiled one, right? Transpiled.
So if I played around with crash reporting in Microsoft Mobile Center a couple months ago, what I was actually using was HockeyApp. Is that kind of, or was there?
You were spiritually using HockeyApp, I guess.
You're on a spiritual journey.
We've it's depending on the feature in App Center, we at times have just ported over the code and replatted it.
Oh, okay.
And other times we've taken what we've known and completely rewritten something from scratch. So like Simina's team has built this build service and this test service. Actually tell us where those come from.
Okay, so the test service is the next generation of Xamarin Test Cloud, which is this huge service with the thousands of devices that Ryan was talking about, and that allows any type of developers to run their UI codes on real devices. And maybe the name is a bit misleading because it's Xamarin Test Cloud, but it's actually for any type of developer because it has support for a lot of testing frameworks. So the test service comes from Xamarin Test Cloud, basically, and it's built on top of Xamarin Test Cloud, and it's the next generation of Xamarin Test Cloud.
Okay, so basically if a developer or a company wants to send out their app on 100 devices, then they don't want to buy them all. You can literally just send them out and have them run on those actual devices. What kind of information do they get regarding those tests? I know a lot of times we want screenshots.
You get screenshots. You get the steps that it executed each long. So for each step, screenshot, right? And then green icon for good, red icon for bad. And if it's bad, then you're probably also going to get the test logs. And if there's a crash, you'll also get the crash logs as well.
And you also get the performance data like hardware usage, CPU. You get all of them for every single step. There's actually a cool graph. And for every single step, you see the point on the graph where the CPU usage is. It's pretty neat.
Cool. Very cool. And going back for a second to the whole HockeyApp thing, I know one of the reasons people use React Native is because it's cross-platform. I guess that's another reason why HockeyApp would be popular is because right now if we want to test, iOS and Android, we're using, I forgot what we've been using for Android recently, but I can't remember the name, but it was a separate service. And then we have, TestFlight for iOS. So you can just put everything in HockeyApp, I guess, and just test it.
But especially if you have a standard set of people that you're going to be beta testing with. Maybe it's, the rest of your dev team, the rest of your company, some set of family and friends. They're probably not
outsourced vendors, right?
Yeah, they're not all going to be iOS. And oftentimes you don't want them all to be iOS or all to be Android. So ideally, it would be nice for you to be able to manage those groups of people and when they get builds versus when other people gets builds, all in the same fashion. And so that's one of the things, because we understand cross-platform development both from React Native and from Xamarin, we've tried to make those use cases easy as possible. So you can just go in, you can set up your build, set up your React Native build, and when the iOS one finishes, send it to the same test group that you're sending it to for the Android one, and then those people will get or not get the notification based on what what device they have and whether or not they've registered it yet.
So it looks like right now the different platforms that the different platforms and operating systems you're kind of supporting right now are Android, iOS, Xamarin, and then React Native. So why React Native? And like, what do you like about React Native in general? Because that's really appealing to our listeners, because we always kind of like to keep our fingers on the pulse of what is hot, what isn't hot. Is React Native viewed by companies like Microsoft as like a very viable platform in the future and things like that?
You look at the growth charts for React Native, whatever chart you happen to look at, right? You're looking at NPM downloads, that kind of thing, right? The actual growth trajectory of React Native is like astounding. And that is not to say that, near as I can tell, there aren't as many React Native developers as there are iOS or Android developers out there today. But I talked to enough native developers who are looking at introducing React Native into their tool chain as a way of reducing code redundancy, right? Nobody wants to write the same object twice, once for Java, once for Swift. Increasing time to market. You know all about this, Nader, right? When you're consulting and you have a competitive bid out with, another shop that says, hey, to deliver both an iOS and an Android app, it's going to take the next 3 months and it's going to cost you $80,000, right? And you, as a consultant, are able to say, you know what? I can deliver it in half that time and for 20% less, right? You're going to be in a better competitive situation to win that bid. And React Native allows you to do that, in part by writing less code, but also, and this is just like a purely, I don't know if this is a personal development preference or if this is objective fact, but I really think that the inner loop, the kind of the process of tweaking your UX, right? Playing around with your business logic is just so much faster because you don't have to wait for that compile time.
Yeah. I think there's another component to your question, which is, okay, why does Microsoft care about React Native? Because Microsoft could have made the choice after they bought Xamarin, which is where I was from. I was the VP of product at Xamarin. Microsoft could have made the choice, more specifically, my boss Nat, who's in charge of Microsoft's mobile developer strategy, to say, you know what, cross-platform is really important, like Ryan said. And the thing we'll support is Xamarin, is C# only is the cross-platform story. But we didn't do that. Instead, we went down the path of saying we really want to meet developers where they are. So there's a bunch of reasons why you want to do cross-platform that Ryan just described.
True that.
And we are more than happy to always give you our personal opinion on which languages and which frameworks for any kind of thing are useful. But we don't want to impose our opinion on people anymore. We want to... Wherever you are, we want to meet you there. We can't possibly meet every developer with every framework out there. There are thousands of ways to build mobile apps these days, and some of them are very popular and some of them are not. We do have to rank things to some degree in terms of popularity. But we just truly want to meet you where you're at. And this is and that's an unusual thing, I think, for Microsoft. I worked at Microsoft almost 20 years ago. I was part of the team that invented C# and the .NET framework. I used C# for years. But my personal preference actually is like Ryan's. I really love the development workflow of React Native. So I'm personally quite happy that we're supporting React Native. But we want to just support all of these things because we just want developers to be happy and productive. Because if they're happy and productive using our tools, Microsoft will benefit as a business in all kinds of ways.
It's funny because you asked one question and we all three of us have different views on the question. Because where my thoughts were kind of picking up from Keith is that I think React Native and App Center are actually very similar in part of their mission. Because on one hand side, they want to make developer more productive. And that's why we are there. We want to make app developers more productive. And as Ryan was saying, being able to ship the same app in 6 weeks compared to 3 months is clearly a productivity thing. Yeah. But in the end, it's about the end user and making, delivering value to your end user and shipping value to them and being able to make things quickly. And when I think about React Native, that's why we write mobile apps to make our users happy. And that's why we are here in App Center to make, to ship value to end customers, to end users of the developers. So I think it's different technologies, but they will still meet in the middle. So, I think it's a great match.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep in mind we're all from a team that builds developer tools, right? We are developers at heart, and we are building tools for developers. And when you kind of are trying to help developers become more productive, deliver their apps faster, kind of be able to enjoy their code more, like our criteria for success are that developers get excited about using our tools. And you can't make a developer excited by saying, go use C# or go use Swift or go use whatever, right? This is, I think, one of the kind of the real challenges of mobile development since its inception, right, is that in a lot of ways we've been forced to use very, very prescriptive tool chains. And that can be great in the early stages of a technology when you need to choose to focus on a single path to get somewhere. But it turns out that the world is filled with a lot of very different, complex problems. And the problems aren't always just the technologies we're using, but also the people that we bring to the problems, right? The knowledges that they bring. And so providing tools that adapt to people's skill sets that they bring to the table, right? And enabling them to use React Native or C# or Swift or Java or Objective-C or whatever. That's what we need as mobile starts to evolve past kind of its infancy and into kind of a more mature kind of platform.
Yeah, I had this question yesterday on Hacker News after our announcement. Yeah. Somebody said, "This looks great. Why in the world is Microsoft doing this?" And I gave this answer. I gave them my exact answer, which is, we just are really passionately care about making developers really productive, because if we think we do that, Microsoft will be in a better place. Those developers will like us more, will want to use our technologies more. Obviously things like getting people to use and pay for Azure are important to us, but there is this just overall strategy of just embracing developers at where they at and giving them tools that they really, really love. And no one believed me on Hacker News.
Like downvote.
Yeah. They were like one guy wrote,
I don't believe you. Hacker News people are like the most understanding in the world.
Yeah, right. They're super empathetic. Yeah. So the one person replied, "What a lovely non-answer." And I was like, I just poured my heart out to you. Yeah. I told you exactly why.
I exposed my humanity.
I'm going back into the closet now. I'm doing it for money, all right? Money. Yeah.
It's super interesting though, because as far as like what you all are trying to accomplish here, because I would say about like 75% of the hard answers that are not there, I guess, right now, at least for some companies, are the things that you're kind of trying to solve right now, with the crash reporting, the distribution, and that type of stuff. So if you guys can nail it, it would be a huge win, not only for your company, but I think for the React Native and the mobile ecosystem in general, because it's such a complex problem to solve. And it's really impressive, actually, after playing around with this, kind of how it's all been brought together into one area.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we're close. I think products continue to improve, so I would never, ever claim that App Center is like done. It's time to move on to something else. And I do feel like there's
V1 done.
Yeah, got it. Nailed that.
Nailed it.
I think though about like what we're going to accomplish in the next 3 months, and the next 6 months, and the next 12 months, and all of the things that we're going to bring into the product, either from like a feature perspective or just polishing the connections, like have me really excited. So hopefully by the time people hear this, we'll have already introduced some of those things, right?
So, is your team also the team that is working on VS Code, or I know that you had some work with that.
On the React side of things, yeah. So there is a separate dedicated team that does. I'm going to use some inside jargon here, but I think it'll make sense to everyone. That focus on the VS Code as a platform, right? Like the basic editor, and then anyone who's used VS Code knows that, a lot of its superpowers come from all the extensions that you pull in, right? So our team builds out the Visual Studio Code tools for React Native and for Cordova. There is a lot of super tight collaboration and between us and their team, but from just an engineering reporting chart perspective, they're a little bit different.
Okay, yeah, because I think the one thing that everyone as a React Native developer already knows and uses is VS Code. It's like super popular right now.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's really lightweight. It works good. It's just beautiful. It's really nice. I mean,
do you think we should add extensions into VS Code for App Center?
Absolutely. If that's something that, you know, could be done, I mean, any way to make it easier for us to kind of have all this stuff already integrated.
Sure. I'm just kind of curious about the React Native developer experience with VS Code. Like when I code, I oftentimes just use a terminal. And so, but one of the things I've discovered is a lot of people are using VS Code's extensions to do things that they otherwise would have done in a terminal.
Or they're using the terminal inside of VS Code.
Exactly. I was going to say that's become super popular, and like a lot of. See, the thing is with React Native as opposed to traditional native development is a lot of developers are coming to React Native from the web, so they don't know anything about the native ecosystem.
Yeah, they're not
in general,
about IDEs.
And they're not about, exactly. So like to them, they're probably switching from Sublime to VS Code, and they're probably going from being a web developer to being a mobile developer and a web developer. And I guess that actually brings me to the next question I really kind of wanted to ask. So I've just mentioned how a lot of developers are coming to mobile through React Native that haven't really worked in mobile before as far as a platform. How does this App Center fit into the workflow, and why would they need all of this stuff? Because we've talked about some of this stuff for sure, but I think just kind of hearing it laid out in that way might help a lot of our listeners.
Mm-hmm. One kind of follow-up question to your question is, when you say like the workflow, do you mean as they're writing their code, or do you mean something broader than that?
As a web developer, like right now we might, create our boilerplate, then we'll add a GitHub repository, and then we'll push to the GitHub repository, and then from there it'll be just pushed to a server somewhere. Mm-hmm. We're skipping, with mobile, there's a lot more stuff that has to happen. Mm-hmm. So like, where would all of this stuff kind of fit in? I guess you're right. I guess that's what you're trying to solve.
Yeah. I think we actually solved this. So we have a just to put it in terms that are like exactly like if I'm a Node developer and I'm used to using npm and all those kinds of things. You can literally do an npm install of our command line tools, and you can use those command line tools to create an app and to set up continuous integration, and even to set up the deployment. So you could literally, within VS Code, never leaving your terminal, do what you just described. Okay, I'm going to go use Yeoman. I'm going to get a little template set up. I'm going to go create a new GitHub repository that I'm pushing this to. And then in App Center, not even going to App Center, you can just do it from your command line, or you can do it from the UI, set up continuous integration. And you can say, okay, for this specific branch, maybe the branch is called develop, right? I want you to always build this, run some unit tests, and then deploy it to my personal phone. And that will then just happen every time immediately with no
And maybe
issues.
run some UI tests, which web developers are also familiar with, right? Or they should be familiar with.
Yeah, and that will just all work.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like we like to say that it's super easy from Git push to having the app on your phone. It's like super easy.
Whereas before React Native and App Center came along, if you wanted to do that, you would have to do a lot more work. I mean, a lot more work.
Yeah. I think the key here is it's not so much that we are adding steps to your workflow here. We're actually our hope, I think we've succeeded here, is that we're taking steps out of your workflow so that you can depend upon the kind of the system, the computer, to automate all the stuff that like is mechanical, right? So the goal here would be if you've, installed all of your command line tools, right? And you say, all right, App Center, look at this Git repository, right? And then all you have to do from there on out is just continue developing the way you normally would. And App Center's job is to monitor that GitHub branch or repository and branch. And every time you check in, right, every time you do a commit, then, okay, we'll spin up a build. Great, it's built, it's tested. And now it's distributed out not only to you as the developer, but maybe, your small team, right? So that everyone is on the same page with the same updated version of the app, and everyone can be in the office, can be playing around with it that day. And then when time comes and you want to integrate it into your production right? Then you're just leveraging the analytics capabilities, right, to have a better understanding of, I mean, it's the same thing as Google Analytics, right? I mean, like, you just want to know where your customers
what's
are,
going
what
on.
they're doing, what's going on.
But with so much, it's the same conceptually, but actually integrating it, it's much more complicated on mobile, typically, at least in my experience.
Typically. For us, it should be an SDK and fire custom events when you need them, right?
Yeah, it should literally just be, I mean, if you were a Swift developer, you'd probably use CocoaPods, so we support CocoaPods. Obviously, you can do it otherwise. With React Native, is this going to be a typical, React Native-based node package that you're just adding to your project? And then one line of code, really.
Yeah, right. There's the documentation is really good on Microsoft's end, and then I've written a blog post on React Native training about how to get set up with code push and analytics in like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm also putting something together on push notifications. It's going to be local notifications, which doesn't have anything to do with App Center, but then the second part is actually adding App Center, and it's been pretty nice experience so far. I'm really liking it. I think a lot of developers coming again from the web have never done push notifications, so it's a lot of work just on the Apple end a lot of times because they don't. I mean, that's another part that has nothing to do with
there's not as much as we can do to fix that.
Yeah, but I mean, like even with all of that, I think I had remote notifications running on Android and iOS in about 30 minutes, which was pretty cool.
That's fantastic. So, that's actually pretty impressive.
I know, I was impressed.
One of the things that we showed yesterday, another colleague of ours named Dima, she did a demo in Nat's session where she showed Cosmos DB, which is this like planet scale database that Azure has that has, it's super fast, it's super flexible, it can keep copies of your data across the planet. But one of the really nice things about it, it's a NoSQL type-like database, is that you can write a function that runs in the cloud when like a data update happens. And so she showed an example of writing a function, I can't remember, I think it was in JavaScript, that would run whenever this row in Cosmos was updated. And then inside that function, she would send a push message through App Center. She would make a REST call.
So I was going to ask about that, actually. That was my next question because having to do with notifications that was the next question I had past where I have my blog post. I have push notifications working, so when I log into App Center, I'm able to manually, send a push notification. What if I want to automate those push notifications? Does App Center do that yet?
Everything in App Center you can do from the UI. You can do from a REST API.
Okay, everything. So you can actually. Okay, so you can do that from a REST API, and that's already documented, I guess. And stuff. Okay.
Cool. We went out of our way. This is like rule number 1 on the team. You can't add UI that doesn't have a REST API behind it. That is in the public Swagger. And every now and then we'll forget. But those are like sins of omission that we then fix. Okay. And then most of the product, but not all of it, the command line interface covers as well. So there's the REST API is at 100% equal to the UI. The command line interface is probably 70% of the.
Especially for the frequent automation jobs, because one of the core principles in our team was that we don't want to have people needing to take all of App Center, that they can take any service that they want and integrate it in their own workflow. So as Keith was saying, you have the command line interface, the CLI, let's say for distribution, and you can just take it and put it in your own build server, whatever that server is, Jenkins, VSTS, whatever, and put it there and still use App Center for some other features.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So I guess what all are you all excited about in the next 3 to 6 months or 3 months to a year, I guess? What is what are the plans for the future with App Center?
Actually, I want to hear Simina on that one because she's got some stuff cooking up in the build and test space.
Well, the thing I'm most excited on right now is that we are finally GA, general availability. So we'll have teams using the product in real production apps, and we're going to be able to learn a lot. Like, I'm just looking forward for the next 3 months to learn a lot, see what people want, and then just iterate from there. Yeah. And we have a lot of polish and integrations between the services themselves to do. So I think there's a lot of improvement space there.
So basically, if someone was looking at Microsoft Mobile Center, Microsoft App Center now, before it was kind of in beta, it's kind of in alpha, now it's released. It's ready to go.
Yeah, I think at least what I hear Simina saying, and tell me if I'm getting you right here, is because it's actually the same sentiment for me, is We've had people who were willing to give App Center a try while it was in beta, but like for some folks, there is a kind of a meaningful hesitancy when there's no guaranteed support, and so the kind of getting feedback from customers now that we're in GA and now that we were already starting to welcome in a lot of customers here, even on day one of its availability, you can tell there's a little bit of maybe even pent up demand, right? Like I expect us to get a lot of feedback, and our goal is to be as responsive to that feedback as possible and to kind of continue iterating, because the same thing that we want for our customers, that you can ship updates frequently, right? That you can ship updates at higher confidence and that you have a better view into how your app is being used. We want the same things for ourselves, right? We want to be able to do the same kind of quick iterative improvement on the service so that developers just like keep seeing it get better and better and better.
Yeah, and for me, I'll give you specific features just because I'm the person in the room who doesn't get in trouble for saying what features we're going to ship. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things I want to see is the crash reporting for React Native apps to be so superb that no React Native developer would ever consider using anything else. So just like with Code Push.
Yeah, because Code Push is kind of in that space
exactly.
to me, at least right now.
It is so superior to any other alternative that every React Native developer uses it. I want to get our crash reporting system to the same place because there's lots of little polishes and little things you could do. And I don't know if that's 1 more month or 3 more months. I think that's that depends, because when you get to polish, it's really about going back to what Ryan and Simina said. You need lots and lots of feedback and lots of scenarios. So I really want to see that get there to the point where it is, because if you're a Swift developer and you used Hockey App's crash reporting, you just had such a meaningfully better experience. Same with Code Push. So I want to see that. One of the things that we don't offer today is when I do a successful build, I say I want to automatically distribute it. And today you can automatically distribute it to an app store or to a beta tester group. What you can't automatically do from a successful build is send it to Code Push. So you still have to do that as a separate step. And I want to remove that step at some point. So I want the ability, ideally, and again, I don't know whether this would take, I don't want to promise this in 1 month, but I think certainly within the next 6 months, I want to see successful builds go to Code Push using the same kind of canary deployment, where if it's working and you're not getting lots of crashes, it rolls out to everybody else. And I want to use that canary deployment to make as a gate to whether or not you could push it out to the app stores.
Right.
And so those are two things I really want to see.
Yeah, I think definitely that's awesome to hear. And I know there isn't a one crash reporting platform that people are wild about right now. It's kind of people are still looking for the best one. So if that
I think we can be that
great.
best one.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then actually, now that we talked about it a little bit earlier, I really want us to build some VS Code extensions for App Center. Like I said, I oftentimes personally kind of forget that that's like a key part of the experience there. And so there should be no reason why. Well, I would say I would love to see some Yeoman templates that anybody can do. Somebody in the community listening to this could do that, and I will be happy to tweet.
What kind of template would you be thinking of? Maybe something that already has Microsoft App Center.
Yeah. You could build a Yeoman template that creates an app to get your app ID, that adds the SDK,
like a generator. Or something like
just
that.
there's lots. I usually use Yeoman templates anytime I do web development or React Native
Let me
development.
know. I could probably build that actually. That seems like something that would be fun. For
I would
me
love
to
that.
do.
I would tweet it out. It should be pretty straightforward using our command line to automatically create the app, get the app ID back, initialize App Center, even set up you could ask a couple questions in Yeoman to hey, what's your GitHub repo, set up the build, blah blah blah. You could probably go even further in future versions. So I want to see someone build that in the community, but then I also want to see us making it possible to do a lot of those things within VS Code as VS Code extensions. That would be another real fun thing.
Good ones.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we're about there on time. Is there anything else you all want to cover before we wrap it up?
I do want to mention one thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about. As just quick one. I know that for Code Push, we received a lot of feedback from folks that they were concerned about security at times, right? Especially from larger financial organizations and things like that. And for folks that may not have been paying attention, this last month here, we did release some improvements to Code Push to add code signing to that. And so anyone who has not tried that feature yet, I really, really encourage you to go check it out. Especially as the days go by, I'm getting more and more paranoid from a security perspective. I think we all, as developers, owe it to our customers, our end users, to start being a little bit more mindful about how we use their data, how we use our own data, and how we protect kind of data, whether it's across the wire, or over the air, or while it's stored, wherever it's at. And so I do want to encourage folks to kind of, whether it's in Code Push with code signing or it's elsewhere, just to be a little bit more mindful. With GDPR, that's Global Data Privacy, or what's the R for?
Regulation?
Yeah, GDPR. Anyone who's got apps that are shipped in Europe will be subject to that. I know it's kind of a wonky security thing, but there have been enough security breaches between Equifax and everywhere else. As developers, the best thing that we can do is be more mindful of our customers' data.
So is that something that you have to opt into in Code Push now, or is it something that is automatically done? Or?
Yeah, you have to set it up.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can set that. What you essentially are doing is saying, I'm going to cryptographically verify that what I uploaded to Code Push was actually downloaded on my end user's device.
Okay.
And that basically it prevents, it lets you detect and prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, where somebody was on some kind of open Wi-Fi and their network was hijacked and things like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Simina, Keith, Ron, thank you for joining me. It was
Always.
really nice having you, and hopefully we'll be back next year for Microsoft Connect 2018.
Love it.
Woo-hoo.
Love it.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, buddy.